is our series AGI Inception. We have Richard here today. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Rupesh. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
All well, all well. So, could you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, happy to. I'm Richard Smith. I'm a futurist, a technologist, an entrepreneur, a philosopher of science, and a cli-fi writer. I've been involved in, I'll talk about that if you want. I've been involved in science and technology since my early 20s, working for companies like AT&T and Sony and Georgetown University Medical School and a futurist consulting firm. And I've also started 3 tech companies, the last one being for the development of a nanotech-based medical diagnostic device. I've got a master's in science and technology studies, and I'm ABD in science policy.
Well, that's impressive. As a matter of fact, I wanted to tell you, now that we're talking about futurists, yesterday, one of the folks that may end up being a guest in the show in the future, he says, I don't know if I'm going to blow you away because I'm a futurist. And I said, I responded to him, I have tried to get artificial intelligence to be conscious for the last 27 years. What's your story? You understand? We are futurists.
Absolutely.
We understand this. So
well, I worked for the futurist firm, and I was telling people what could happen in the future, what various scenarios might be. And I got tired of talking about what someone else was doing and decided to do it myself to make the future. And that's when I started the company with the nanotech-based thing.
All the crazy.
My saying is, we're living in my future. I am living in my future right now. It's an amazing thing. Anyway, let's jump in. Rupesh, give us the main theme.
So coming back to our theme again, we need one word starter or a first word principle for the self-assembling artificial general intelligence. So what is your word going to be, Richard?
My word would be Hippocrates.
Oh, wow. That's a first.
As in the Hippocratic Oath. In other words, do no harm. Wow. My first exposure to artificial intelligence was when I read Ike Asimov's I, Robot, with its 3 laws of robotics, which could serve well, at least in conceptualizing AGI. If you replace a robot with a computer or an AGI, you get to some very interesting concepts about that. And so things historically that have been somewhat similar in terms of advancing technologies that could be really helpful or really harmful. You had the Asilomar Conference on DNA, the Foresight Institute, which I've belonged to for many years now, looking into the ethics of nanotechnology, not just the ethics, but the implementation of self-assembly, that version of nanotechnology, not necessarily nanomaterials. And even to some extent, the Shelter Island Conference after World War II, it wasn't just about safety from nuclear weapons and other forms of nuclear physics implementations, but it did cover that. Feynman was one of the key leaders of that conference. So for a long time, we've looked at ways to mitigate possible harm while not stopping a science and technological adventure from taking place. And that's how I see my role and have for quite a long time. This is really exciting. This can do wonderful, wonderful things for humanity if it doesn't kill us first.
So, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Let me ask you a question in there. Now we're really into this. Do no harm. Do no harm. We have an example. There are 2 patients in the hospital, in the emergency room with coronavirus. They both need a ventilator within the next 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But there's only one ventilator.
Right.
Now, your do no harm AI, how would it deal with that situation? 30 seconds, if he doesn't do anything, both die, or just one survive. Do
Are
no
both
harm.
going to die within 30 seconds, or does one have a little bit more time?
Okay, well, that's a good question, actually. Let's imagine that one is older than the other, so that the probabilities go to the younger man,
Right.
or woman, whatever.
But also the younger person will probably have more opportunity to contribute to mankind, just by virtue of the fact that they are younger, able to produce more than someone my age would be able to produce.
Our age.
Okay, exactly. So my first thought was, let's be Solomon. Let's let the AGI say, okay, we're going to split the ventilator, and we're going to use it on two patients instead of one.
Okay. Well,
But that comes from how do I do the least harm? And it may not be possible, but and that's why I asked the question.
Yeah. This is perfect. So if in that example, do not harm Richard AI. That's the name that I give it to that AI. Says, okay, we're going to try to split it if we can. If we cannot, well, then we know that, you say that the younger man have more possibility to contribute. And this is where I was, what about if the older man was Steve Hawkins 10 years, 20 years before he died? Oh. And he was the older.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing revolves around setting priorities. What's more important, the intellectual contribution one can make, or the number of years one can contribute? Is there a family? Is one a murderer? And I presume that
I could add one more variation to this. The younger one could be Steve Jobs, who is 20 years old, or Bill Gates, who is 20 years old. Come on.
Well, that's what he's saying. Another question. So let's imagine that a question or another word you will need think in terms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, the nodes 1, 2, and 3. So let's say that your first one is do no harm.
Okay.
And then what would be the second? Would it be a question? Would it be a word?
It would be a concept that I'd have to turn into a word. And as a wannabe writer, I should be able to do that. It would have to do with setting priorities, deciding some way or another, what is the value of something? What's the value of the age? What's the value of, did he commit murder? All of those things. And I presume an AGI would be able to sort that very quickly based on all the information available, which is probably going to be all the information.
Yes, that's correct. It will be, and I don't think people understand that. It will be all the information that is on the internet, digital, everything.
And obviously someone will come along with ways to spoof that, but because whenever you build a fence, someone will build a higher ladder. But we have to think about, what are the things that we now know and try to anticipate the things that we don't yet know in order to put together a way for an AGI to not blow itself up the way what was it, V'ger in the original Star Trek movie? It got so circular that it destroyed itself.
Yeah.
So tough question. Probably the toughest, I think.
One of the things that you just mentioned in terms of assigning priorities, think in terms of all the information on the internet right now, all the information. And they do not harm Richard AI have access to all that information. But you, as the designer, as the creator, with that first word, now you have a chance to even be more detailed. And you say, how am I going to tell my AI that do not harm Richard AI? How do I say, do not harm will be 90%. When you interpret information, you need to interpret do not harm 90%, 95%, 99%, because you know that the internet is not 99, do not harm.
Yeah.
So how would you, not how, but what ratio would you give to your AI so it can interpret the data, the world, based on do not harm?
I'd start with a metaphor, the N95 mask. We've decided that 95% is a good number to start with. So
Okay.
if it works
Oh,
for
yes.
start there.
Bravo.
And
So me and Richard are on the same
have
school
some
of
way to
thoughts.
determine the veracity of the information that is out there for the AGI, for the Richard AGI to evaluate. Is it truthful, or did it come from a Russian bot?
Uh-huh.
How does it know? So another hurdle we have to get over.
Yeah, but you know something, and this is where I think experience and dreams mesh in there. As a futurist, with an AGI, assuming that as a matter of fact, would you assume there will be multiple 100,000 millions of AGIs, or it will be a singularity AGI that controls everything?
I will tell you, I'm writing a novel right now, and it takes place in 2050. And it has AGIs and robots and flying cars and, you know, the kinds of things you would expect, but it's based in a frame of climate change. So the scientist wants to create a partial solution to climate change by building a disassembler, a nanotechnology disassembler to separate carbon from oxygen. And you need the AGI to do all of the enormous math that's entailed in keeping these little microbots from flying apart from each other and, you know, getting out of the hive, if you will, or dropping to the ground, or eating too much carbon, and then we have other problems. Okay, so the scientist has to weigh all of these things as he does the programming of his AGI. And it takes place in 2050, as I said.
What's the name? What's the name?
White Grass.
White Grass.
Wow.
I want our audience to know that when White Grass comes, Richard is going to let us know, and we're going to feature White Grass.
I love it. I love it. I'm in my final, well, in my most recent rewrite right now. But in order to get from here to 2050 without there being a singularity, as you just mentioned, that's been a conundrum for me, because the way things are advancing, 2050 might be pretty
too late
after a singularity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But COVID jumps in to save my bacon, because things will be slowed down so much by this pandemic. Maybe the singularity comes later.
No, I would rather say that would speed up the process. Because there's going to be a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And we might need AGI to fill the holes.
Because there's going to
be
a lot of computation.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupesh.
There's going to be a lot of computation which is going to be required, and which is going to be required quick. Because there's going to be a lot of lives depending on it.
And my question to you, Richard, is not when. We don't know when. You explain it perfectly. Actually, that's the way I explain. I also explain it to other people. It's kind of interesting. But think about this: how do we as a human race recognize consciousness in artificial intelligence?
I would say Turing 5.0.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'd like to change that thing entirely, because, like, to be brutally honest, see, Alan Turing was a brilliant person, and that is what the Turing test is based on. But he was a brilliant mathematician. He wasn't that emotionally intelligent when it came to understanding how humans operate. So we need a different test altogether, in my opinion. I could be wrong.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I
Well,
agree.
let me tell you. Let me ask you, Rupesh. Let me ask you. Saying that we need a different test is easy. What is hard is saying what are the parameters of that new test. And I'm going to ask Richard that question. Let's say, for example, but you're a futurist. You can make it up, of course. Yeah, like I do.
I'm a science fiction writer or climate fiction writer, so I can make it up even better. That is so hard. I can't even wrap my brain around it. How do you know if this AGI really is I?
Okay, to be brutally honest, we could simply start off the parameters of that test by keeping them exactly opposite to the test which Turing test has. Like the parameters of a Turing test, it could be exactly opposite to the parameters of Turing test.
Well,
Exactly opposite.
mathematically, you cannot say. You can say, but it doesn't. Logically, mathematically, logically, you cannot say 1 equals 1, but then that 1 now is 2. it just doesn't do that. But consciousness. You know what I tell Richard, my wife? How do I know you acquire consciousness? What I said is, they're gonna come some men dressed in black, gonna come to my house, and they're gonna say, Alberto, we are from the government, and there's somebody who wants to talk to you specifically. And I tell my wife, then we know we're in trouble.
Oh boy, it was great. It was a great talk today. I'm so sorry we're gonna have to wrap it up because of the time.
Richard, I'm serious. We need to do this again when your book come out. We will do this again, and it has been a pleasure. I don't know if it happened to you in your professional life, but sometimes, I used to say people 20, 30 years ago used to laugh when I used to talk about artificial intelligence and the future technologies like nanotechnology. And I'm going to tell you one thing. It is good to feel that I'm with my family, with the people who talk the same language and feel the same way, even if we disagree tremendously.
I grasp that completely.
Thank you, family. Thank you for becoming part of our
family. Thank you, family.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was great having you on the podcast.
Thank you. I'll do that. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.